Hi everyone. We are going to just give it a couple of minutes. I know there was a little bit of confusion with the registration link, so we'll give it a couple of minutes to make sure that everybody has had the chance to register and receive the link, and then we will get started. Perfect. It looks like we've got a few more joining us now, so we will get started because I'm aware that we've got a fair amount to cover in the hour that we've got together. So hi everyone, I'm Lucy and I lead the Compassionate Employers Programme at Hospice UK. So my role involves working with organisations across the UK and deliver training and workshops, as well as supporting to review and enhance people policies, as well as engaging with internal employee support networks as well. Our aim is to really ensure that employees are supported through the most significant moments in life. And Hospice UK is a national hospice organisation. We work with hospices across the United Kingdom. We represent just over 200 hospices. So we specialise in making sure that employees are supported through terminal diagnosis, either themselves or somebody that they care about, as well as navigating any caring responsibilities they may have outside of their work. And of course, ensuring that support and compassion is there for employees who are navigating bereavement and returning to work following the loss of somebody that they love. So Northern Trust has been a member of the Compassionate Employers Programme for 5 years. It's just come up to the 5-year anniversary. So hopefully this isn't the first time that you've heard about us, but if it is, then there are a host of resources that we can share after today. And I'm really thrilled to come along today just to run a short session in terms of looking at what it really means to lead with compassion. So by the end of today's session, I hope that you feel a little bit more confident in terms of understanding what leading with compassion means, as well as taking some really practical tips and skills away so that you can implement it to your day-to-day work as well. If you'd like to introduce yourself, maybe your role within the organisation, and if you fancy telling us where your last holiday was. And I always like to hear about all of the exotic travels that everybody has been on, whilst I'm daydreaming about my next trip. But as we only have an hour, some of the things that we will cover today will include understanding what compassionate leadership is and how to enhance your compassionate leadership skills within your role, exploring what it means to support an employee through a significant life moment, practical tips in terms of holding those compassionate conversations, understanding how leading with compassion can really support us to deliver on that intentionally inclusive behaviour, and remembering that to lead the best of our teams, or to lead our teams in the best way, we must also look after ourselves. So we will finish the session with just a few slides around managers burnout and self-care as well. Due to the nature of some of the topics that we'll cover, I just want to remind everyone that it's really important to look after yourselves. If you feel triggered or upset by any content, then please feel free to take time out. There will be a recording of the session, which will be circulated afterwards, so we'll make sure that you have time to catch up on it. And I'd also just recommend that you take sort of 10 to 15 minutes after this session just to take some time away from your screens, to get a drink, maybe some fresh air. Hopefully it's sunny where you are. and just to get some quiet time to reflect. Hopefully it will bring up things that you can really think about how you can implement in your day-to-day roles. So we will get started. There will be time for Q&A and any kind of reflections at the end. So do interact as much as you wish in the chat box or in the Q&A section. So I find it really helpful to kind of set the scene when we're talking about supporting employees through significant life moments. And the reality is that we're witnessing an increasing number of employees with far more on their plate, whether it's navigating their own mental or physical health challenges, or balancing full-time employment alongside caring responsibilities, or indeed dealing with loss and grief at work. We're seeing a real need for greater compassion and trusting relationships at work, especially between managers and their teams. So recent research from the Workforce Institute found that 69% of people actually report their managers having as much of an impact on their mental health as their spouse. And although this might sound surprising to some, I don't think it's particularly surprising. We spend an awful lot of time at work, and we are seeing an increasing number of people who turn to their line managers first for support. So we believe it's time that we equip managers with the skills they need to sit in those moments of vulnerability with their employees, but also know where to signpost them and how to practically support them within their organizations. So just some of the kind of key stats around this at the moment is that only one in five managers feel confident supporting an employee following the death of a loved one. 77% of 18 to 34-year-olds would actually consider leaving their job completely if their employer didn't provide the support that they felt appropriate following the death of somebody close to them. There are currently 3 million unpaid carers in the workforce that may not identify themselves, all juggling caring responsibilities alongside their employment too. And 64% of employers actually offer no guidance for line managers in terms of supporting somebody who is diagnosed with a life-limiting or terminal illness. So one of the things that we do within our program is to make sure that employers are better equipped to have these things in place, whether it's line managers guidance, whether it's policies, or of course these sorts of sessions to help raise the profile and education around how to deal with each of these different situations. So what is compassion? Researchers define compassion as an emotional response to another person's struggles, accompanied by a genuine desire to help. So it's distinctly different from a closely related concept, which is empathy. And empathy involves sensing and feeling and detecting and understanding what somebody else is going through, where compassion goes one step further because it includes taking that responsive action to actually help. The compassionate leaders will treat their employees the way that they want to be treated. They'll focus on creating an environment where staff feel trusted and valued and safe to share and express vulnerability as well. But we know that it doesn't necessarily come naturally to all of us, and many of our leadership skills are based on our previous experiences or our current experiences of our managers. So we know that over time, many leaders have become conditioned to believe that the workplace is meant to be an emotion-free zone, a place where our personal lives can be boxed away during the hours of 9 to 5. But we are seeing this changing, and I think the pandemic had a big impact on that as well. But also this emerging Generation Z workforce that are choosing jobs based on the real investment into employee well-being as well as compassionate culture. And of course, it's important for us to reference the fact that we have an aging population, which is paired with the cost of living crisis, which means that there are more employees staying in work for longer, often whilst navigating their own personal illnesses or possible caring responsibilities, whilst also being additionally at high risk of having multiple experiences of bereavement during their working life. So supporting employees through these really significant moments is really crucial to retaining talent within the workforce, not to mention that real ripple effect that compassionate leadership and culture can have across the organisation. So within this first section, we're going to be talking about kind of how do we enhance those compassionate leadership skills within our day-to-day roles. And I'd like you to just think about kind of what does compassionate leadership look like for you? Have you dealt with situations where you supported somebody through significant life moments? How did you show up for them during that time? Did you feel overwhelmed or flustered by it? And just keep that in mind whilst we're going through the next few slides. So the King's Fund explains that compassionate leadership involves a focus on relationships through careful listening, understanding, and empathizing with and supporting other people, enabling those that we lead to feel valued, respected, and cared for so that they can reach their full potential and do their best work. We know that without that kind of community of culture and support around people, it can be very, very hard to return to work following significant life events, or indeed it can mean that people are off for prolonged periods of time with complicated mental health conditions, struggling with dealing with all of the life that's happening outside of their work. So the King's Fund came up with 4 behaviours to explain compassionate leadership that we like to follow here at Hospice UK. So this includes attending. So this means being fully present and focused on others. So listening with fascination. Listening is arguably one of the most important leadership skills that we come across. Compassionate leaders listen not only during those difficult times through challenges and obstacles, frustrations, but also they are there to show up and support their teams through successes and joys, both personal and professional. Understanding involves taking the time to really thoroughly explore and understand the situation that somebody is living with or dealing with. It means valuing that lived experience and being open to different perspectives rather than simply imposing our own interpretation on a situation. Compassionate leadership requires treating people as individuals and tailoring support for their unique circumstances. Emphasizing empathy in leadership means being present with colleagues during difficult moments. It means sitting in that sadness with them, sometimes holding space for their distress or their frustration or sadness without becoming too overwhelmed or indeed moving the conversation onto our own lived experience. And we will touch on that a little bit in the later slides. And of course, it means helping. So helping involves taking thoughtful action to make sure that our individuals and teams are protected. So it's more than just signposting to an EAP or handing off the responsibility to a wellbeing champion or HR. It means really sitting with that person, advocating for that person, and trying to remove the barriers that they may have in place, which can enable them to access the support that they need. It's really important to understand that helping looks different in each situation. So that might be adjusting workloads when somebody feels overwhelmed. It might be offering flexible working arrangements or simply providing resource and support that's out there and available. So each of these behaviours relies on us having a real deep understanding of who is in our teams, who are they, what challenges they may face, and how confident we feel in offering them the right support when it's needed. Because for every employee and every situation, this might look different. And that's one of our greatest challenges in leading teams effectively. So how can we embed this in practice? So it's really important to create space of vulnerability. It's not something that we all feel massively comfortable with. And some of you may well have heard the term psychological safety. So this refers to how confident we feel in terms of taking appropriate risks at work based on the quality of our relationships with our colleagues and our managers. So in psychologically safe environments, people are less defensive. They are more focused on achieving team goals. They feel more confident offering up original ideas or sharing different viewpoints, asking questions, and of course, admitting mistakes, knowing that they won't face punishment or judgment by their manager or their wider team. When an employee experiences a significant life event, it can really dramatically impact their ability to kind of function as normal. For example, a bereaved employee may well return to work and no longer be able to perform at the previous level that they were, maybe worried about making mistakes, or just simply not having the capacity to take on the workload that they had before. But leading teams that feel psychologically safe not only supports that day-to-day function and that performance, but it also creates space for that vulnerability to support teams and individuals who may go through those significant life events during their employment. It's important for us to be purposeful, so we need to ask the right questions and avoid asking the wrong ones. We'll explore language a little bit more in the later slides in terms of those significant life moments. But first, it's really important for us to be able to recognize when an employee is struggling, whether it's personally or professionally, and also knowing how they would like us to respond. Where possible, both personalized and practical in that approach. So instead of asking questions like, do you need help? Is there anything I can do? Maybe consider more thoughtful and specific support, sitting down with an employee and understanding what challenges they may face, identifying the ways that they may struggle. If they can identify that, that can be really helpful for us to be able to spot the signs before it's too late, but also knowing how they want us to show up for them in those moments. This also does include some level of understanding for what resources and support is available, whilst also being familiar with any kind of relevant policies or guidance that may exist within your organisation. And I know that when you become a line manager, very often we don't have necessarily the time to go through all of the people policies that exist, and much of our work is reactionary. We will come to things as we see fit. So if you're supporting somebody who's experienced the bereavement, it might be the first time you're doing it, and you might not have seen your bereavement policy before. And one of my key takeaways from this is to be more proactive in terms of looking at what those people policies say, so that you know how to use them in those situations. It's really important to celebrate compassion and vulnerability within your organization. I think it's really important to lean in to engage with those networks within the organization and those key campaigns that help bring greater visibility to these topics. Creating space for vulnerability at work really opens the door for others to feel the same, that they can be vulnerable, but also they can share and they can learn. And we've seen some really powerful examples of senior leaders opening up to teams about their personal struggles or their vulnerabilities. And it's given greater visibility and solidarity to those employees who may be facing similar challenges. I know at Northern Trust you've got many employee networks, one of which being the Carers Network, and I would really encourage you to reach out to those networks that exist internally so that you know what kind of internal support is there to be able to signpost your employees to, or indeed lean into yourself. It's really important to know our power. So when an employee shares vulnerability with us, it's really significant. So honor their emotions and reflect on the impact that your response can have. Be the kind of manager who actually really advocates for the best treatment of employees. Understand how policies work, what they look like, and actually how they can be applied flexibly to meet the needs of that person. It's really important to gather all of the information that you can so that you can help an employee make an informed decision about the support that's available for them. Often when people come to us in these moments of great vulnerability, they don't necessarily have the ability to collect all of that information themselves. So be that person who can advocate for them in that moment and make sure that they've got all of the knowledge that they need to be able to make that informed decision. It's also okay to be unsure. Line managers often feel real immense pressure to know exactly what to say in moments of vulnerability, but it's okay to not have all of the answers. Use your networks, check in on anything that you're unsure about, practice conversations beforehand, allow yourself to learn along the way. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time, especially when we're dealing with building very bespoke relationships with each of our employees, but you're doing your best and you're learning along the way, which is what matters most. Every employee's experience will be different, will be unique. So getting to know your team personally will really help you to show up for them in the best way possible when they need it. We're going to talk a little bit about honouring and supporting employees through significant moments. In the next few slides, we will talk a little bit about grief and grief theory and how we might be able to spot the signs in some of our team that they might be struggling. So some of the key definitions. So grief is the emotional reaction to loss, whether it's through a death or through a living loss. Bereavement is the experience of somebody important to us dying. Anticipatory grief refers to feelings of loss or grief that you might have before a loss actually happens. So we often see this with people who are anticipating the death of somebody that they love or somebody who is living with a life-limiting or terminal illness. Disenfranchised grief is often misunderstood and invalidated by social norms. It's not one that we talk about as much, but it is something that we nearly all will feel that we resonate with, because examples may include things like a loss of identity, a loss of a job, moving house, the breakdown of a relationship, or a breakdown of friendships. And a carer is anyone who looks after a family member, a partner, a friend who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, mental health problems, or addictions. Simply somebody who cannot cope without the support that we give to them. And normally, carers are unpaid, especially when they are in the workforce. So it's really important to support people following the death of somebody that they love. But when we talk about grief, it's a much broader spectrum than just experiencing a bereavement. So that might be the death of a pet, it might be a relationship breakdown or a divorce. It might be that they've been diagnosed with an illness, or somebody they care about has been diagnosed with an illness. It might be job changes, redundancies, changing restructures. It could be that they have caring responsibilities. It could be that they're struggling with fertility, or indeed have experienced miscarriage or baby loss. It's really important to be thinking about all of those kind of different significant moments in life that people might experience during their working lives, because many of us will experience one, if not multiple of these during our working lives. And as managers, we have a role to play in terms of shaping what that support looks like around that person during these really crucial times. So what does it look like? So it would be really interesting to see if anybody's got any ideas in terms of how you have seen grief present previously, or indeed have felt it yourself. So whether you know any kind of emotional signs or spiritual, cognitive, physical, or behavioral. I'll just give you a second to put any suggestions in the chat in terms of what we might be looking for or looking at when we are supporting somebody through grief. Yeah, changes in behavior. Sorry, I saw somebody come put their hand up there. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself, but if you can, then please do feel free to share. No worries, thank you. Yeah, I can't think straight. Brain fog, becoming withdrawn, disengaged, not eating or sleeping. Absolutely. So all of these are really common. I mean, when we look at the emotional impact of grief, we might see sadness, we might see anger at the person or the world. You see fear, anxiety. Lots of people struggle massively with anxiety. Who's going to die next? You know, missing a phone call from somebody that you love can suddenly set our heart racing. A real shock, even if death isn't sudden, the real finality of death can feel very shocking for many people. Numbness, you know, total overwhelm, it can send us into real survival mode and make us numb to our feelings and the world around us. We also see people feeling helpless, lonely, guilt. And additionally, you might well see that some people feel a sense of acceptance or relief. And it's really important for us to talk about this, because it's something that we can feel really guilty for. It's quite often something that we shy away from. But people who are living with anticipatory grief, who are watching somebody that they love um, in pain or suffering, or having experienced a very long run up to somebody's death, having had those living losses. For example, if somebody had been caring for somebody who had dementia and they've been losing them slowly as the person that they know for a long time, there can be a really big sense of relief knowing that they are finally at rest, knowing that they don't have to suffer anymore, and knowing that you don't have to worry about them or worry about what those final moments of their life might look like. When we talk about cognitive, I think it's really important for managers to be aware that the cognitive impact of grief can be huge. So decreased ability to concentrate and process information, difficulty in decision making, forgetfulness, We talk about brain fog, and we've worked with many people who, for months after a death, will feel really frustrated by the fact that it's having such an impact on their ability to function as normal. How, previously tasks that's felt, easy now feel complicated or exhausted. In terms of behaviours, we may well see withdrawal from social interaction, irritability, or a short fuse within teams. This can cause some friction. It can mean that we feel like we're walking on eggshells, and that can mean that the impact on the wider team could be much greater, and something that as line managers we're having to navigate. We might also see people having really hypersensitive reactions to topics that maybe possibly previously wouldn't have fazed them. Physically, again, something that we shy away from quite often, but that physical side effect of grief is real, in that we might see people with sleep disturbances, weight loss, weight gains, aches, pains, IBS, headaches, or just being so physically run down that they actually just end up poorly. And it's also important for us to reference spiritual and the way that actually, when we are bereaved, grief can have a real difference in terms of what it looks like for our faith. It may mean that we question our faith and we question our belief systems, or on the flip side, it may mean that we are leaning more into our faith. We are becoming more active within our faith communities or changing the way that we practice our worshipping. So it's really important, you can see, to kind of take reference on all of these different areas that can impact somebody. It's not just during a bereavement that people might have these, but it's during any of those associations with grief or loss, because we are going to be supporting people in our team, and we need to know all of those different things that might be going on for them during these times. It's also really important to recognize that no two experiences of grief will be the same. And for some people, these symptoms might come and go, but it's important to be mindful of each of them whilst we're navigating it ourselves or navigating it with our employees as well. So I don't like to lean too heavily on grief models, but I do think this dual process model can be really helpful, especially from a manager's perspective in terms of visualizing how grief might work for people within our teams. So this model helps to highlight how we bounce between loss and restoration, quite often with grief. So during our loss days, we may lean really heavily into our grief. We may sit in the sadness and focus on our life before our loved one died. And we often refer to those days as kind of duvet days. So the days where we feel really weighted down and we can barely peel ourselves off the bed or off the sofa. And then during those restoration days, we may lean more heavily into making new memories, forming new relationships, and figuring out our new identity now that somebody has died. And I do think this is really helpful to just highlight how grief ebbs and flows, and an employee may seem fine one day and struggle the next. So in the loss stage, an employee might find it hard to concentrate on tasks, or they may seem withdrawn during meetings or struggle to socialize with colleagues. But the same employee a few days later may come into work and seem more focused on their tasks, engaging with social events, leaning into project work. And what's really important to recognise is that grief isn't linear, and it's important to be able to support our colleagues as they maybe bounce back and forth between loss and restoration for some time, sometimes months, sometimes years. We often make the mistake of seeing people in that restoration phase and say, like, okay, they're doing well, they're coping, they're moving on. But there really is no finish line for grief. But providing that compassionate, flexible, and understanding working environment where employees feel like they can express themselves at work and bring their full selves to work can help create that environment where we have people in those restoration days and we're able to support them leaning more heavily into those restoration days. It's also important to recognise, when I say grief isn't linear, that employees may well be impacted around key anniversaries or dates. So lots of people will find celebrations hard, maybe Christmas, Father's Day has just gone, Mother's Day, the death anniversary of their loved one. So where you can, as a manager, take a note of some of those days, be mindful of how people might be feeling around those times, because those big emotions that they're feeling just after a loss may well be much more raw around those significant dates, and think about how you can support them during those times. So I've spoken a little bit about kind of compassionate conversations, and we have designed 6 key principles for this. Important to just highlight as well, as members of Compassionate Employees, you do have access to our e-learning, so you can practice this online. I'll make sure that the link is shared afterwards, and it's open access. So if you have people within your team that you'd like to complete this, then I would really recommend you sharing it with them as well. So our first principle is to, no worries, thank you. Our first principle is to listen attentively. So pay undivided attention, be present in the conversation, not just listening to respond. If you're in a work setting, think about how we can minimize distractions so that we can be fully present. Turn on do not disturb, put your phone on mute, find a private room, avoid busy settings. We are all guilty of having notifications constantly pinging in the background. And one of the things that I've recently done is turned off the notifications on my watch as well, because I realized that actually that's just as much of a distraction as having my phone in my hand pinging notifications. Respond mindfully. So, take a moment to process before you respond. Consider what you've heard so that you can really build on the conversation. And this can be really helpful when we're trying to mirror the language of the person who's sharing something with us. So maybe they've told us that their dad has just died, and they're using the language that he's died, not that he's lost, but he's died. And so let's try and mirror that language back to them. I'm really sorry that your dad died. Let's see how we can help you. Be observant, notice details, body language, mood, and attitude. Try your best to remain in an open stance. Be patient whilst they talk, and try not to seem restless, because this can make people feel like you may have somewhere else that you feel like you need to be, or indeed that the conversation is making you uncomfortable. And I think it's important to practice that, try and sit with other people and have those conversations so that you can practice what it looks like for you to not be fidgeting, to be fully present in that moment with that person. Manage silence. So learning to sit comfortably in silence is not something that we're massively good at in society. It's something that I'm personally trying to work on more, but silence is really healthy, and sometimes it's the comfort that somebody needs. Try and practice sitting in that discomfort of silence without filling the space with more words. It can be really, really difficult, but again, practice can make a huge amount of difference there. Respect emotions, so acknowledge that all emotions are valid, and try not to deny the ones that you don't relate to. Try to remain neutral. Remember that we all have different responses to grief. Some people may well want to crack on and get on with life and want to avoid talking about any emotions at all. So respect that, but be there if things do come up for them later down the line, that they then have to deal with those emotions that might be coming up for them. And lastly, consider other perspectives. So try to welcome other experiences, try to withhold any judgments, but also try not to project your own experiences back on the person too much. It can be really helpful to share your personal experiences, because that can make space for that vulnerability. But if somebody is sharing with you, be mindful of sharing your personal experiences of grief without permission. It can be really helpful, but make sure that you're prioritizing that person in that conversation ahead of your own experiences, so that you're not trying to kind of defer it away from what they've been going through. Before we come on to this next section, I just wondered if anybody had any questions around grief, if you've experienced supporting somebody with it, or if you've had any reflections on things that have been really helpful for you to be able to signpost to, or anything like that. That would be really helpful to hear about in the chat so that others can learn as well. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the behaviours that exist within Northern Trust, and hopefully you're all well aware of them. We'll make sure that the links are shared afterwards to any resources. But the development of your compassionate leadership skills can directly support you in demonstrating your intentionally inclusive behaviours. When you're supporting an employee through a significant life event, it's really essential to value and respect their personal experience, whilst also identifying the right accommodations that can help them access support and adjustments that they may need. And this obviously includes honouring and respecting different cultural and religious celebrations too. So within the Members Hub that I've mentioned previously, you'll find a dedicated section which has a huge host of guidance for line managers around supporting employees with diverse cultural experiences of bereavement, death, and dying. So within that, we share some resource around what it might look like in terms of the lead up to somebody dying and what the kind of support systems around the family might look like and what the cultural practices around dying might look like. But it's important also within that to recognise that some of the different bereavement rituals will be different for different cultures. So that's also highlighted within there too. Yeah, so just to reflect on some of the comments in the chat there, so someone told me that they wanted people to acknowledge the loss, which I recognise the next time it happened with somebody on my team. And I think that's one of those key learning moments. And one of the things that we do recommend is when you are supporting somebody following a bereavement is to ask them how they want that news communicated with the team, but also how they would like the team to witness or reference it when they come back to work. And we are currently putting together a return to work document, which will help you with that kind of real guidance around having those key conversations. So we'll make sure that that is circulated as well. Question on not projecting one's own experience to someone going through grief. We have got additional resource and guidance around kind of safely sharing in that space, so we'll make sure that that is shared as well afterwards. All of this is on our on the resource hub in the line managers section, so we'll make sure that we share that with you. One of the key documents, just to highlight, that we've recently created that you will also have access to is our Get to Know Me document. So leading with intention and inclusion means really knowing your people, and it includes, you know, being able to identify the barriers they may face, especially those that maybe aren't immediately visible to all of us. So the Get to Know Me document can support you with building those really or having those trust building conversations with your team. It encourages that open dialogue. It helps you better understand what each employee's individual needs, preferences, and challenges may well be. This tool also really helps employees feel more comfortable in terms of identifying themselves if they've got caring roles or additional learning needs or other personal circumstances that they might want you to be aware of as well. But the key aim is for us to be able to use this to build a more holistic picture of each person in our team and document how they want to be seen and supported at work. We do recommend that if you are using this document, you treat it as a living document, something that is maybe reviewed annually alongside appraisals and performance reviews, just to help ensure that space is always there for that vulnerability, and also just to reflect on how people's roles and their lives will evolve during their career within the organisation. So we'll make sure that you've got a copy of this. We found that it's been a really well received document in terms of people feeling like they have a slightly easier guide to have these conversations. We know that it doesn't come naturally to everyone. We know that maybe if you haven't grown up in a family that feels confident and comfortable talking about some of these topics, and it can be very, very vulnerable to put ourselves in these positions. So we're hoping that with some of the resources that we're creating at the moment, we can help you have those conversations and remove some of those barriers to those conversations too. Before we head on to the final section around managers, burnout and self-care, is there any kind of reflections around what's worked for you or any questions that have come up so far? Okay, perfect. So managers burnout. So managers burnout happens when somebody in a leadership role becomes physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted due to ongoing stress and high pressured situations at work. So it can leave managers feeling completely worn out, making it difficult for them to stay motivated or make decisions, or indeed maintain the energy that's needed for them to support and inspire their teams. So prevention is key. We know that prevention is much easier than trying to deal with it after the fact. So what are the signs that we need to be looking out for, both in ourselves and in the people around us? So burnout can affect both how we feel and we perform at work, but also in our personal lives as well. For managers, the pressure of leading teams, making decisions, supporting others can be particularly challenging. And there is a growing need for managers to be able to support emotional resilience within their teams that we've seen year on year become more and more intense since the pandemic. So, some of the key signs that you might be looking out for just to spot the signs of burnout. Feeling constantly tired and drained, so you may feel physically and emotionally exhausted, even after a full night's sleep or after a long weekend, or indeed having a holiday. Some people really struggle to recharge their battery. When this kind of fatigue doesn't go away easily, it's something that can impact us throughout our day, both at work and outside of work. We see people really struggle with a lack of motivation. So tasks that once felt meaningful or energizing may now feel like a chore. You might find it really hard to get started in the morning or disengaged from your goals and your responsibilities. Many people struggle with focusing, so burnout can really cloud our thinking. You might struggle to concentrate or forget things more often, or make it much harder to make decisions. We also see managers quite often struggle with prioritization in terms of missing deadlines or maybe having to delay deadlines. Mood changes and irritability. So you may well find yourself becoming more impatient or frustrated or short-tempered with your colleagues and your team members. So small issues may feel really overwhelming, or they may well trigger a real strong emotional reaction within you that previously wouldn't have been the case. We see lots of managers struggling with isolation and withdrawal. Managers experiencing burnout tend to pull away from others. So you might avoid meetings, reduce your communication, or stop engaging with your team the way that you used to. It's important to highlight that within burnout, we also see compassion fatigue. So when you're constantly supporting others, it can become incredibly emotionally draining. So compassion fatigue is when you start to feel numb or detached from the people that you're actually trying to support and trying to help, which can make it really hard for you to lead with compassion and offer empathy and support for employees when they need it. It's also really important to reference the fact that burnout does come out physically as well. So it doesn't just affect your mind, it can show up in your body too. Some of the physical symptoms might include headaches, muscle tension, stomach issues, and trouble sleeping. Many people just not being able to switch off at all from their working responsibilities. So I think it's really important. We all talk about self-care. It's not always the easiest thing to implement, but it's really important to identify sustainable self-care activities that work for you. So think about how you switch off outside of work, what routines or activities help you recharge to fill your cup, whether that's exercise or reading, time with loved ones, or simply taking a walk. Find out what it is that you need to be doing every day to help you keep that battery charged, as well as being able to offload some of that mental capacity that you're carrying for your team. Don't be afraid to share or show vulnerability, whether that's with your team or with your manager. So you're a human too. Life happens to all of us. It's all good and well us coming on here and saying you need to be doing X, Y, and Z to support the people within your team. But you also need to show yourself that support too. So leading with vulnerability can take some getting used to, but sharing personal experiences, building that trust, building that relationship, building those connections can also really support you. And it helps to ensure that your support network is there from your managers and senior leaders so that they are there to step in when perhaps you're not able to manage certain situations. Try to communicate with your network, so lean on those around you when you need extra support. We all have times where life feels a bit overwhelming. So whether it's your line manager, whether it's a peer, whether it's someone else in your department, try not to suffer in silence. Helping to ask is really, really important. It's a strength, it's not a weakness. You have to keep your self-care a priority to make sure that you're able to continue to show up for your employees as well. And try to lean into learning. It's okay to figure things out as we go. So none of us have all of the answers, and that's perfectly okay. One of the most challenging parts of being a compassionate leader is that we won't always get everything right. So use the guidance that is available for you, seek advice from your networks to help try and create a personalized support for your team who can step in when you need it. So even if things don't go perfectly, you will be better prepared for next time, and you'll be better prepared to support the next employee when these kind of significant moments in life happen. So what I would love to hear is I'd love to have a little discussion around self-care, and if you could just take a couple of minutes to think about something that helps you relax, something that energizes you, something that makes you feel happy. And if you're happy to share in the chat, that would be brilliant. So for me, I think being able to relax means being outside, being in nature, walking. I also really like to cook, which helps me switch off, listening to a podcast or music just to escape. Some of the things that energize me are going to the gym, going for a dog walk, going for a run. And the things that make me happy are like ultimately spending time with my family and my friends, but especially with my daughter and my husband. Those are the things that I need to be doing every day to make sure that I have the emotional capacity to keep supporting my team and showing up for them the way that I need to. We've got some comments. Walking in nature, breathing, focused breathing, the gym, absolutely. Walking. I have to do a big sponsored walk. Swimming in the sea. Oh, I'm jealous of you being near the sea. Reading, baking. Yeah, I think sometimes it's really helpful to kind of break it down into these categories because I think it feels like a much more tangible task to be able to look after our self-care when they are things like this. I would really love to hear of any internal support systems that you have in place. I know that that there's a EAP program and other internal support networks as well, but it would be really good to hear for any other managers on the call, if there's other ways of you connecting with managers across the organization where you can be supporting each other, or if indeed that's something that we can look at. As a final reflections and questions, it'd be great to hear from you what are kind of two key takeaways from today, and how you will use today's training in practice would be really brilliant. Great to hear the EAP has been really good and you've been able to recommend that to people. Business resource councils and mentorship with the senior leaders, that's great to know about. Pockets of support, but more could be done in terms of those formal support networks, absolutely, so we can pass that on. And in terms of resource for you to be able to help you deliver on these kind of compassionate leadership qualities, is there anything in particular that you think would be really helpful for us to be able to create to support you doing this? We'll have the Get to Know Me document and the Returning to Work Following a Bereavement document that will come out in the next couple of months as well. Is there anything else that you think would be really helpful for you to to kind of practice any of these things. Mental health first aid champion network. Yeah. Yeah, the return to work. I do think that would be really helpful. Yeah, so with all of the documents that we create, we try to make them a co-creation. So it's really there to facilitate the conversation between managers and employees. So ideally, what we'll do with the return to work document in a similar way to the get to know me document is that there'll be key questions within there for managers to ask, but the opportunity for employees to share as much as they would like to share. Within it will be things like significant dates that we might want to take note of, but also any ongoing administration that you might have or any ongoing responsibilities that you might have in regards to this person's death. You know, whether there's an inquiry, whether you have to clear a house, whether you are dealing with the life admin or the probate process. Anybody who's dealt with a bereavement or supported somebody through a bereavement will know there is a lot of life admin that comes after somebody dies. So even just being able to understand what they might look like for managers, I think would be really, really helpful. Okay, brilliant. Well, if there is nothing else today, we will wrap things up and we can come back. Any questions, feel free to send to me directly, of course, and we'll circulate the resources, the recording from today as well. So just to say thank you very much for joining. And yeah, I hope that it's been a helpful session for all.